Hi, I'm G. Welcome back to my art channel, and today I'm showing you how to paint this fuchsia flower using watercolors. And first up, if you missed the drawing tutorial for this fuchsia, then if you check in the description below or click the link on the screen, you can go and check that video out. And here you can see I took the pencil drawing, light boxed it, and went over my lines on watercolor paper with watercolor pencils. And I used just 3 colors for the flower itself: permanent rose, Winsor scarlet, and ultramarine blue. So let's start painting, and I start with a size 3 Sable brush, and I put on a mix of the Winsor scarlet and the permanent rose that I've mixed in a palette next to me, ready to go. And I start with that bit, and then the top bit I drop in a purple, and the purple is a blend of permanent rose and ultramarine blue. So I've got that in the palette as well, so the 2 colours are mixed and ready to go. So you see me drop in some of that purple because this leaf is a bit shadowed at the top and I don't think it's shadowed enough. So what you can see me doing here is dropping in a bit more of that purple mix while the paints are still wet, while the colours are still wet, so it'll sort of blend around and flood around a little bit, like watercolour does. Next, you see me adding some more of that red towards the base here to fill out the shape of this petal, and I work it upwards a little bit because I'm worried that the leaf's going to be too dark at the top, so I just adjust a little bit there. Then I put some cool and some clean water onto the brush, just a little bit, and what you can see me doing here is adding that kind of just water at the very base of this petal and just brushing it a little bit back and forth into the colour that already exists. So the petal will be a bit paler at the base here and darker at the top where the purple is. So I've done my usual thing of starting with one of the smaller petals just to make sure everything's okay and to build my confidence. Now you can see me swing over to one of the petals on the other side. And again, I'm starting with my reddish mix, the permanent rose and the Winsor scarlet. And I start at the very, very top and I work my way down so that I'm not going to smudge any of my paints with my hand as it rests on the paper. And then I drop in a little bit of that purple, again, just at the tip, just at the top, whilst the colour is still wet. And I'm blending purple into the red now because this petal is curling over, so it is a bit shadowed. Now, as we get towards the sort of halfway bit, you can see me popping in some more red, but it's got a little bit of tinge of that leftover purple mixed in with it on the brush. But that's okay, I'm okay with that. And I start to curl the colours down and around, again, looking to fill out the shape of this leaf, this petal, with colour. And at this point, I notice on my reference photo, it's a bit more purple at the very bottom where the light's hitting it. So I put some purple in here and I work it back into the colour that's already existing and sort of blend those two together where they meet. And then I get the brush and I put in a little bit more purple and I sort of just pull that back. So I'm filling out the entire shape of the petal right now with the purple and also the red. And I've kind of blended them together where they mixed. It's a bit too strong, so I'm looking to lighten that purple area. So here you see me drop in just a little bit of clean water. I'm trying not to brush it too much, just a few little strokes, and I'm letting that kind of just push and spread outwards into the colour to give it a highlight. Now you can see me doing the bit of the petal underneath, and this is just pure red. I just get a whole bunch of that red that I've mixed on the palette, on the brush, and I pop it in. And what I'm doing is I'm just sort of brushing it upwards, and I'm leaving a really delicate thin white line to be the edge of the top of the petal and the bottom of the petal. So that's what you see me try to maintain as I just gently brush this size 3, should have used a slightly smaller brush, up the side of this petal. I'm trying to maintain that very, very thin, very delicate white line between the top and the bottom. Now those 2 petals were quite bright with a lot of pigment, but these ones on the side are catching a lot of light and are paler. So I start with the red mix, but I immediately put my brush into some clean water and then apply that clean water straight onto the paper and work it into the colour. So I'm making the colour paler. I'm diluting the colour that's already there and moving it around a little bit with the brush so I get a nice pale pink tone. And then on the next couple of petals, I go in with shadow straight away. So you can see me start with purple here and start to brush that purple down on the edge, on the side of this petal. And then I'll get my brush and I'll dip it in a bit of the red mix and I move the red mix further down. So it's a sort of like slightly purple colour giving way to this slightly more scarlety red colour. And then I'm doing this petal the same way as I did the one before. I start with some dark strong pigment, and then I get my brush in the water straight away, clean water on the brush, and I just start to brush that water down the edge of my paint, just letting the two flood together a little bit more clean water on it now for the very edge. So basically it's almost like three tones. It's dark, then I made it a kind of a mid-tone with some clean water, and then I make it a really pale tone with some clean water just down the edge. Now this petal is one of those that's behind the rest. It's on the other side of the flower, so it's very shadowed. So you can see me use a lot of purple here to begin with before, again, I drop in some of the nice red color that I've mixed, and I'm making sure that I'm getting it from the palette and it is strong pigment. So even though I'm putting on the red, it's still got this kind of dark intensity to it, and I just finish off that entire petal trying to keep it nice and dark without adding any of the clean water that I've just been using on the other petals, because this one is going to be very much in shadow. By the way, if your water that I just showed you is that dark with that much paint in it, it's time to go and pour it away and get some fresh water. The fresh water will keep the colours really, really fresh and vibrant. So now you've seen the method that I'm using. I speed up the rest of the flower, and you can see how I handled the rest of the fuchsia using exactly the same kind of approaches and using exactly the same colours. So I've got that red mix that I'm putting onto petals, and where I need it to be a bit darker, you can see me add some of the purple into that red and then streak it around. If I need it to be paler, I get my brush into the clean water straight away, give it a swizzle, put it on a bit of a damp cloth to get the worst of the water off, and then I apply it to the paint while it's still wet, and I work it back and forth and up and down, and I can get some of those edges to be lovely and pale. Looking at the flower as a whole flower, the main thing I'm trying to do right now is make sure it's quite shadowed on the left-hand side of the flower, but much paler on the right-hand side, which is where the light appears to be coming from and hitting this flower. So that's my main thing to give it depth. Darker on the left and then lighter on the right. So here you can see me filling one of those top petals again, using a bit more of the purple than red, but the actual kind of bell-shaped stem that you've got is a lot of red and a lot of purple. So I put a lot of pigment here, leaving some of my white highlights there as much as possible. And then I do this big fat petal, which is again starting with red, and as I move down towards the petal curls underneath and get shaded, I put on lots and lots of purple there and just let it run and do its thing, running into the red a little bit. Try not to guide it too much with the brush at all. Now with the stamen and the stigma that hang down, some of them are against a very, very dark petal, so I don't want to use exactly the same purple for those. So I use a slightly watered down purple for some of the stamens so that they'll stand out against the dark petals in the background. But for some other parts of the stamen that are hanging down, I can use the sort of the straight up pure purple that I've mixed, and that'll work absolutely fine. And here you can see me just sponging and tissue papering a couple of little bits to pick up some paint. And then I change to a very, very fine brush. This is like a 111 that I've lost a lot of bristles to, so it's super, super fine and thin. And I use that and some of the purple to just put in a couple of very, very faint, veiny kind of lines on each of the petals, just as an extra detail. Now for the background, there's a lot of green, so I'm using my two greens straight up, pure from where they are. So sap green and Winsor green blue shade. And here you can see me putting them in with a lot of water. So I want my leaves in the background to be very pale. I want them to be very fuzzy. So I'm dropping in little bits of colour all over the place and lots of water to keep them flooding and flowing into each other a bit. I don't want too many hard edges in the background. Now the most crucial thing about the background is, yes, I'm using some sap green, yes, I'm using the Winsor green, but the dark areas that I'm getting in these leaves in this background are coming from the purple that I've got left over. So that's exactly the same purple that I used on the fuchsia, but I got that in the palette, and that is going to be the colour that I put into the shadows and let it run into the greens, making the greens a bit darker. And my idea there, my planning is that some of the colour that was from the fuchsia is now going to be in the background, so that will link the background, which I've done a lot paler and a lot less bright. That's going to link the background to the flower and give the overall picture a slight kind of colour theme running through the entire picture, or at least that is the plan. And that actually was my plan from the start, to keep the background much paler, fuzzier, so that the flower in the foreground, being such bright colour, would really pop outwards, pop forwards, and you'd get this feeling of depth. Now you can see me just filling a little bit I'd forgotten, which is the green stem, and that's just sap green with a little bit of purple on the edge of it to show that it's like shadow on that left hand side. So I'll pop in a bit more of that purple, but it's really just sap green and purple, leaving those white highlights to be as shiny as possible. So there's the finished painting next to the photograph, and I was really worried before I started this. I just had a feeling that it wasn't going to go well, so I'm actually really pleased with the outcome. I like the fact that my painting has actually achieved, I think, more depth than my reference photo has got, but let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you like this video and want to have a go yourself, then in the description below you'll be able to find a link to both the drawing tutorial and the reference photo that I used for this. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and thanks so much for watching.